Hi everyone, it's Amber here again. If you followed my story before, you probably know a little bit about the silence that once filled my home. That strange, almost haunting quiet that came after my children left for their own lives. Today, I want to talk about what came after that silence, because what I discovered was not just emptiness, but a kind of second spring, a rebirth I never saw coming. It didn't happen overnight. It started slowly, quietly, the way seasons change without you even realizing it. One morning, I woke up and the light felt softer. Not brighter, just softer, warmer. The house was still quiet, but the quiet didn't hurt as much anymore. It was like the silence had learned to breathe with me. I got up, made coffee, and instead of rushing through my morning like I used to, I just stood there by the window, holding the mug in both hands. I looked out into the yard where the little bird once tried to fly, the one I told you about in my last story, and I thought, maybe I'm still learning to fly too. And in that moment, something in me shifted. Not a big, dramatic change, just a small, gentle click inside my heart. You know, for so many years, I defined myself through the people I loved, my children, my husband, my family. I was a mother, a wife, a caretaker. I gave and I gave and I gave, because that's what love looks like when you're raising a family. But I never asked myself, who am I when the giving stops? When the lunches are packed? When the laundry baskets are empty? When no one needs you to wake them up for school anymore? What's left of you? For a while, I didn't know. I wandered around the house like a ghost haunting her own life. I looked at family photos and wondered if that smiling woman in the middle, me, was still in there somewhere. And then one day, I decided to look for her. Not because I had some grand plan, but because something inside whispered, you can't live the rest of your life waiting for noise to come back. So I did something small. I took out an old box of paints from the attic, paints I'd kept since my college days. The lids were dry, the colors faded, but I remembered how it used to feel. The smell of turpentine, the sound of the brush on canvas. I missed that feeling of creating something that was mine. The first time I tried again, my hand trembled. The lines were uneven, but it didn't matter, because as I painted, I felt something bloom in me, like a seed that had been buried for too long finally touching sunlight. From then on, I made time for color. Some days it was painting. Some days it was cooking something I'd never tried before. Thai green curry, remember? I burned it the first time, and my kitchen smelled like coconut and chaos. But I laughed. It had been a long time since I laughed like that. Loud, messy, real. That laughter, it was my heartbeat coming back to life. And then something beautiful started to happen between David and me. It wasn't dramatic. There were no big confessions or romantic gestures, just attention. We started noticing each other again. He'd bring me coffee in the morning. I'd leave little notes for him in his lunch. We went hiking, exploring small towns nearby, holding hands like we hadn't done in years. Sometimes we'd sit together on the porch and just talk. Not about the kids, not about bills or groceries, just talk. About silly things, about dreams we'd forgotten. And slowly, the space between us filled again. That's when I realized something important. When your children grow up and leave, you don't lose your purpose. You just shift it. Love doesn't end. It transforms. I began to see my life not as something that was winding down, but as something quietly beginning again. It was my second spring. You see, spring isn't only for the young. It's for anyone brave enough to start over. Even after decades of routine, even after heartbreak, even after thinking your best chapters are already written. I used to think middle age was a place of endings, the end of motherhood, the end of youth, the end of being needed. But I was wrong. It's not an ending at all. It's a bridge between who you were and who you're still becoming. And I think that's the part no one tells you, that it's okay to change, that it's okay to be scared, that it's okay to look at your reflection one morning and not recognize the woman staring back, because maybe, for the first time, she's someone you're just beginning to truly know. My second spring didn't come wrapped in excitement. It came with quiet mornings, slow discoveries, and gentle courage. It came when I stopped mourning the woman I was and started celebrating the woman I was becoming. Now, when I walk through my house, I still see the traces of my children everywhere. The crayon marks on the wall, the old photos on the staircase, the laughter that seems to echo in the corners. But instead of sadness, I feel gratitude. They had their seasons here, their summers, their winters, their own springs, and now it's mine. I spend my days painting, volunteering, cooking, learning, not because I have to, but because I want to, because I deserve to be curious again, to wake up and feel alive, to have a reason that begins and ends with me. People sometimes ask, Amber, don't you miss the chaos? Don't you miss being needed every second? And I tell them, yes, I miss it deeply. But I've learned that being needed and being fulfilled are not the same thing. Now, I'm not needed in the same ways, but I'm fulfilled in new ones. I've learned to fill my own cup, and that, my friends, is freedom. If you're watching this and your house has also grown quiet and your days feel a little too still, I want you to know something. This silence is not your enemy. It's an invitation. It's the universe saying, it's your turn now. So take that class, go for that walk, burn the curry, paint the sunset even if it looks like a mess, laugh too loud, cry when you need to. Be proud of every version of yourself, the mother, the wife, the woman, the dreamer. Because there's no expiration date on joy. There's no age limit on new beginnings. If the first part of your life was about giving love, then this part, your second spring, is about receiving it. From the world, from others, from yourself. I used to think that when my children left, they took all the color with them. But I see now they didn't take it. They simply gave me the space to paint new ones. So here I am, Amber, still a mother, always a wife, but now, finally, just me. And I'm learning, day by day, to bloom again. The air feels softer these days. The light feels kinder. And when I look up at the sky, the same sky my children are under, wherever they are, I whisper a little prayer of thanks for them, for love, and for this second spring, the one I thought would never come, but somehow, quietly, beautifully, did. You know what's funny? For years, I thought rebirth meant starting completely over, like erasing everything you've been and building a brand new life from scratch. But that's not what it feels like at all. Rebirth, at least for me, has been more about remembering. It's remembering the woman I used to be before everyone else's needs became louder than my own. Sometimes I find little clues of her hiding in the most unexpected places, in an old notebook filled with sketches from my college days, in a song that plays on the radio, one that used to make me dance in my kitchen before the kids came home from school, in a scarf tucked in the back of my closet that still smells faintly of youth and perfume and laughter. These small things remind me that she never really disappeared. She just waited, patiently, quietly, for me to come back. And coming back to yourself after so many years, it's not easy. There's guilt, the kind that whispers, how dare you enjoy this time when your children are far away? There's fear, the kind that asks, what if there's nothing left for you now? And then there's that heavy, lingering doubt that says, maybe you're too old to change. I wrestled with those voices for months. Some days they won, but on other days I won. And on those days I'd wake up early, put on my sneakers, and walk through the park just as the sun was rising. The light filtering through the trees looked like forgiveness. The morning air smelled like possibility. One time, I met a woman sitting on a bench feeding the ducks. She smiled and we talked for an hour. She'd lost her husband 2 years ago. She was learning Italian, planning to travel for the first time in decades. Her eyes sparkled when she spoke, not because her life was easy, but because she decided to keep living it fully. I remember walking away from that conversation thinking, maybe this is what courage looks like in our age. Not climbing mountains or chasing fame, but choosing to still be curious about life. That idea stayed with me, so I began collecting small acts of courage, trying a new hairstyle, joining a local art group even though I felt out of place among strangers, saying yes to invitations I would have politely refused before. Each yes was a seed, and together they grew into a garden of little joys. Sometimes I think that's what the second spring is, a garden made from everything you've survived. It's proof that you can bloom again, even in soil that once felt barren. There were moments, of course, when the past tried to pull me back, like when I'd see a young mother with her toddler at the grocery store and feel that sharp ache of nostalgia, that longing for the chaos, the noise, the tiny hands tugging at my shirt. But then I'd remind myself, I had those seasons. I lived them fully. Now it's someone else's turn, and my job is to honor the woman who lived through all of it and still dares to dream. David noticed the change in me too. He said one night, "You smile differently these days. It's like you're not waiting for life to happen anymore. You're living it." That made me tear up because he was right. I used to wait for the kids to visit, for the holidays, for something to fill the days. Now, I don't wait, I create. We even started a small ritual together. Every Sunday morning, we drive to the same cafe downtown. He orders his black coffee. I order a cappuccino with way too much foam. We sit by the window, read the newspaper, share bites of pastry, and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes we laugh until people turn to stare. Sometimes we just sit in silence, holding hands across the table. There's a calmness in us that didn't exist before. Not the kind that comes from routine, but the kind that comes from gratitude. And gratitude, I've learned, is the secret ingredient of the second spring. It's what turns ordinary moments into miracles. It's what makes you look at a simple sunset and think, this is enough. I am enough. One evening, while cleaning out the attic, I found a box labeled Amber's Dreams. Inside were old letters to myself, lists of things I wanted to do someday: travel to Italy, learn to play the piano, host a dinner party with homemade desserts. That word, someday, stared back at me like a quiet challenge. I'd written it down 25 years ago, and suddenly I thought, why not now? So I enrolled in a local piano class. I could barely remember how to read notes, but my teacher, a kind woman with silver hair, told me, "Your fingers remember what your mind forgets." She was right. The first time I played a full song, even with clumsy pauses, I felt something light up inside me. It wasn't about perfection. It was about permission. The permission to still learn, still play, still start new chapters at any age. Sometimes I catch myself smiling for no reason, just because the day feels good against my skin. And I think if my younger self could see me now, she'd probably laugh. She'd say, "Took you long enough." And she'd be right. But I'd tell her, "You'll understand one day. Growth needs time and grace." There's another thing I've come to realize. Rebirth isn't just about finding joy. It's also about forgiving yourself for the years you forgot to. I used to feel guilty for all the ways I thought I could have been a better mother, a better wife, a better version of myself. But now I see that guilt for what it really was: love with no place to go. And when you turn that love inward, When you finally let it rest in your own heart, that's when healing begins. So I practice kindness with myself. I rest when I'm tired. I forgive the woman who doubted too much, who tried too hard, who forgot herself for a while. Because she did the best she could, and now she deserves peace. The second spring teaches you to slow down, not because life is ending, but because it's deepening. You start noticing the small things again, the way sunlight moves across the floor, the sound of rain tapping against the window, the taste of tea that's been steeped just right. And you realize these are not small at all. They're the very texture of living. If you're listening to this and thinking, I wish I could feel that way, let me tell you, you can. It doesn't matter how lost you feel right now. The path back to yourself is still there, waiting. It begins with one question: what makes me come alive? And the answer might be simpler than you think. For me, it was painting, walking, laughter, connection. For you, it might be gardening, writing, singing, or learning something new. It doesn't have to be big, just something that lights a small flame inside you, because that's how every spring begins. These days, when I look at my life, I don't see an empty nest anymore. I see an open sky. My children are out there somewhere under the same clouds, living their own stories. And here I am, living mine. I think about that a lot. How love stretches, how it doesn't shrink when we let go. It expands. It becomes space for them to fly, and space for me to grow. Maybe that's the quiet truth of motherhood. You spend years teaching them to stand on their own, and when they finally do, you realize you've been teaching yourself too. And now I'm standing, not in the same way I did when they were little, but stronger, steadier, more rooted in who I am. When I walk outside these days, I feel the wind brush against my face, and it feels like an old friend saying, "See? You made it," and I smile back and whisper, "Yes, I did, because this season of rediscovery, of laughter and light and love, this is my second spring, and it's more beautiful than I ever imagined." Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit with an old notebook in my lap. It's the same kind I used to buy for my kids before school started. Clean pages, thin blue lines, a small promise of beginnings. Now I fill it with small pieces of myself, little memories that come back in flashes, things I notice, thoughts that arrive quietly, like friends who don't knock before coming in. Last week I wrote, "Joy doesn't shout, it whispers," and it's true. The older I get, the more I realize that happiness isn't something loud or constant. It's hidden inside the ordinary, in the smell of bread baking, in the sound of my husband humming in the next room, in the sight of morning light spilling over my coffee cup. For so long, I was chasing big feelings, accomplishments, perfection, proof that I was doing enough. Now I see that the smallest things were always the most sacred. The second spring taught me that peace isn't the absence of noise, but the presence of understanding. You stop asking, "What's next?" and start asking, "What's here?" And what's here is life. Not a grand, cinematic kind of life, but a real, human, beautiful one. I think a lot about time these days, how it moves, how it bends, how it teaches. When I was younger, I used to think time was a thief, stealing youth and moments I could never get back. Now, I think time is a sculptor. It doesn't take, it shapes. Every line on my face, every scar on my heart is a mark of what I've lived through. They're not flaws, they're carvings, proof that I've been here, that I've loved, that I've endured. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and I don't see loss anymore. I see history. I see the story of a woman who gave, who worried, who tried, who laughed, who cried, who kept showing up. And that story, it's worth loving. The other day, Sarah called from her new home. She sounded happy, a little tired, the way young mothers do. I listened to her talk about her baby's first steps, and I felt this quiet pride. Not the loud kind that wants to be noticed, but the deep kind that fills your chest and warms your bones. I realized then that the circle had turned. She was living her spring, and I was living mine. Both of us blooming in different gardens but under the same sun. After we hung up, I sat for a while, thinking about how life gives and takes in cycles. There's a rhythm to it, a soft one, like breathing. You inhale new beginnings. You exhale what's finished. You don't fight it anymore. You just let it move through you. That's what this stage of life feels like now, a long, peaceful exhale. Sometimes people ask me how I managed to move from that emptiness to this fullness, and I tell them it wasn't about fixing anything. It was about allowing myself to be sad, to miss, to grieve, allowing myself to stop pretending that everything was fine. And then, when I was ready, allowing joy to come back in. I stopped pushing. I started welcoming. You can't rush healing. You can only open the door when it knocks. And one day, when you least expect it, joy walks in again, quietly, gently, but with both hands full. If you told me years ago that I'd be this peaceful now, I probably would have laughed. But here I am, in the middle of my life, and I feel more alive than I ever did at 20. It's not because everything is perfect, it's because I finally stopped trying to make it perfect. There's such freedom in letting life be imperfect and still beautiful. Sometimes, when the afternoon sun filters through the curtains, I close my eyes and think of all the versions of me that have existed. The young dreamer, the overwhelmed mother, the tired wife, the woman searching for herself. They all live inside me still, and now, instead of fighting them, I thank them. Because every version brought me here, to this moment, to this second spring. I've started writing letters to my future self. Nothing fancy, just simple notes I tuck between the pages of my books or tape inside my journal. Little reminders for the woman I'll be 5, 10 years from now. Dear Amber, one of them says, don't forget that you are allowed to change again. Another says, you are still becoming. I like the thought of finding them one day and smiling, knowing that even then, I'll still be growing. Growth doesn't end when your children leave home. It doesn't end when your hair turns gray. It doesn't end when you slow down. Growth ends only when curiosity does, and I don't plan to lose mine anytime soon. If anything, curiosity feels brand new again. Every day, there's something small that catches my attention. A bird building its nest, a stranger's laughter in the cafe, the way the wind changes direction just before it rains. These are the small miracles of paying attention. I think that's the heart of the second spring. You finally start seeing what was always there. So, to every woman standing where I once stood, at the edge of a quiet house, holding memories that feel too heavy to carry, please listen. You haven't reached the end. You've reached the threshold, the doorway to your next chapter. Take a deep breath. Step through it. Life is still waiting for you with open arms. The second spring won't arrive all at once. It will sneak in softly, through laughter that feels freer, through mornings that taste sweeter, through the gentle rediscovery of yourself. One day, you'll wake up and realize the ache has softened and the silence has become music. And you'll smile because you'll know you didn't lose yourself when your children left. You just finally had the space to find yourself again. I don't know what the years ahead will bring. Maybe more wrinkles, more changes, maybe even more goodbyes. But I'm not afraid anymore because I trust life now. I trust that whatever comes next, I'll meet it with open hands, with grace, with gratitude. After all, I've already learned how to fly once. I can do it again. And if I could leave you with one thought, it would be this. Middle age isn't the sunset everyone says it is. It's dawn, disguised in softer colors. It's the second spring, quiet, luminous, and full of new beginnings for those brave enough to see them. So here's to us, the women who've loved, lost, learned, and are still learning. Here's to the silence that taught us to listen. Here's to the years that shaped us, the dreams that still call to us, and the courage it takes to answer. Here's to the second spring, because it's ours, because it's now, and because we've finally learned how to bloom.